In Andor, you reap what you sow. That is the slogan of the series finale in my mind. What comes around goes around, and that's what we see throughout the thematic weight of the last 3 episodes of Andor. The series finale is finally here. This has been one of my favorite shows. I've talked about it. It blends the real, it blends our history, it blends the now. This is an incredibly, inherently political TV show right now in this moment of time. Also capturing something that I find quite fascinating with Star Wars in general. And I think this is the most respectful of the prequels that we've seen. You can see that Tony Gilroy is clearly inspired by what George Lucas is accomplishing in the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. And we get to this final moment in Andor where everyone has to pay the price for everything that they've been doing. And that's what I want to talk about today. So instead of going through a beat by beat analysis of the last 3 episodes, I kind of want to just wrap up by talking about the characters within these final 3 episodes, their arcs, where they go, how this ends, and how it all ties back into the larger idea of Star Wars. Originally, while watching the series finale, I had some mixed thoughts on it initially. The more I've thought about it 24 hours later, the more I have liked it. It's a lot more tempered in its finale that I really ended up liking. But the more I thought about it, the more I liked what it had to say on revolution and the cost of freedom. I have this thesis for it, and I said the finale of Andor explores the cost of a rebellion and the price of freedom. In the finale, the Rebel Alliance is legitimate, but at the cost of revolutionary blood, freedom fighters, imperialists, bystanders. It's all the same for it. And now we get to the point where Rogue One happens, and specifically where Star Wars in its inception begins with 1977's A New Hope. And let's just kind of talk about the outline of these characters, where they go. And again, this is going to kind of be based on the fate of these characters. So in episode 10, the premise of this episode is essentially Luthen gets word of the Death Star from his spy in the Imperial ranks, Lonni. And so let's start with the character of Lonni, who's been this Imperial spy the whole time for Luthen. He pays the price with his life. He is the guy warning the Rebel Alliance of what is going to happen. And when he does this, when he warns Luthen of the Death Star plans and what Dedra has in her laptop, or I guess it's not a laptop, her database, whatever they call it in this world, like, he realizes the destruction that this is going to cause, as does Luthen. It's the reason you see Luthen panic and why they have to basically enact and get this news to the Rebel Alliance. In this moment, though, Lonni becomes a burned spy. One of my favorite beats in this moment is the questioning, and this is the little stuff that Tony Gilroy does so smart as a writer. Notice the question that he asks of Lonni. We are going to go to Yavin. And Lonni basically is like, what's Yavin? Like, what is it? Like, he mispronounces it. It's such a smart little thing that Luthen does of, is Yavin known by the Empire? In this case, it's not. Lonni isn't aware of this. And there becomes so much, like, Lonni has to abandon his family essentially to keep them safe. And obviously this results in his death. Luthen leaves him for dead on the park bench. And what I thought about a lot was the hubris, and this is going to be a reoccurring thing. A lot of these characters end up becoming undone by their hubris. He was a spy for the Empire. This was only going to end one of 2 ways, and to be honest, he probably got the more just, more caring ending. Imagine had he gotten exposed and now the Empire is dealing with him. Luthen gave him the easy death. He wasn't going to have that easy death otherwise. Like, it is such a cold-blooded thing for Luthen to do, but it's also the decision that Luthen has to make. That's the geniusness of the show, is in that moment there is actually something just simple and plain about his death, in the fact of, you know what, he will not have to suffer at the hands of the Empire. He gets his easy end out. Luthen says it very plainly in season 1, and he says it directly to Lonni in his like iconic speech. We can't let you go, Lonni. We can't spare you. Luthen was speaking quite literally. He could not spare Lonni, even at the end. And that then brings us to the character of Luthen, who is the central focal point of episode 10. This is a Luthen heavy episode where we essentially learn the fate of Luthen. I should just mention, as it's been pretty obvious, but this is going to be spoiler heavy review. So just be warned, do not watch this if you haven't seen the finale of Andor. But Luthen gets his comeuppance in this episode, and we all knew it had to happen. We all knew he had to die because that is who the character of Luthen is. He talks about it very consistently, longs to build for a sunrise that he'll never see. Like, that is the whole thing with this character. And he has this meeting with the character of Dedra, who's arguably, this is the most noble thing that Luthen has done this season, which is just, he doesn't kill Dedra. He doesn't set this trap. He doesn't kill hundreds of innocents in exploding his shop or anything. He does draw blood, and it's his own blood. It's kind of a shocking moment in this scene to just see him just essentially commit suicide in this moment, to basically not be brought in. Of course, this doesn't exactly work out as planned. I can't tell if that was intentional or not. I think it is a little bit of the hubris of Luthen in this moment. But again, it's supposed to show and symbolize something. Like, Luthen's done running, and he knows this moment was always going to come. He knows he is the burner, and also he knows that he has to be it because otherwise it would be Kleya. And this is the real focal point that I want to talk about with Luthen and Kleya's plotline, because that gets a lot of clarity in episode 10. This was my favorite of the 3 episodes released Tuesday, and it is the Kleya Luthen backstory, where essentially we learn that Luthen seems to be some form of an imperial military who basically, as the people on this imperial march are killing civilians, Luthen has this breakdown. He has this thing that he keeps repeating over and over. Make it stop, make it stop, make it stop. Like, he's in the ship just having a meltdown at the loss of life happening around him. And this is where we find out that this little girl of Kleya has basically hidden in his ship. And he finds her and basically vows to keep her safe. And then this starts this surrogate father type relationship between the two, which obviously will then end in Kleya doing what she does at the end of episode 10, which is taking Luthen's life. This was such a beautiful arc within the show. This was probably my favorite thing that Andor did this season for the supporting cast, was building up Kleya's story and giving this moment so near the finale to just explore these two. And this is also brings me back to this idea that I have on Star Wars, which this is so much about parents and kids. This is a franchise built on Vader and Luke, Mando and Grogu, Anakin and his mom, Jyn Erso and Galen Erso, and we're going to find a few more later on when we get to that part. But this is also what this is. This is Luthen and Kleya, this surrogate father that she now has. And in many ways, she redeems Luthen. He has a bit of humanity left, and there is a bit of beauty to him. So again, we see this backstory between these two, Luthen and Kleya. And in this, she learns what it takes to kill and what that means. In this very dramatic moment, she sees a firing squad of stormtroopers. And then a few scenes later, they're at this bridge at Naboo, and Luthen tries to basically get her to explode the bridge. And when it seems like she's about to, Luthen takes it away. She is the spark of Luthen left within the Rebel Alliance. Her whole getting to Yavin 4 is the bit of Luthen that will continue to persist. That little bit of spirit of Luthen, that part of the rebellion exists within her. It is the honoring of the revolutionaries who got us there. And it's just a really beautiful thing, and it's a really beautiful moment when she has to make the decision to do what she does. And it's throughout. We see essentially Luthen take the master Padawan role with this character of Kleya. So much so that, and this could be coincidental, it could not be, but think of the scene in Revenge of the Sith where Emperor Palpatine says, "Do it," and then Anakin cuts off Dooku's head. We essentially get that scene in Andor as well with Luthen, where Luthen tells her to click the button and blow up the bridge. And he says, do it. The only difference is he takes that away. He doesn't want this young, impressionable girl to do it. He wants her to understand what he's doing and what's going to entail, but he also seemingly cares about her and wants to keep some bit of innocence within her. That's why the moment at the finale works so well, as she works her way through the hospital in what is one of the most grueling, just badass moments we've ever got in Star Wars, where she is just an assassin out on a mission, going through the hospital, killing stormtroopers, killing Imperial officers. And she gets there, and how they just kill Luthen in that moment. It's not violent. She just unplugs his air, and he ends up dying that way. His life support is taken away, and it fades to black slowly. And we focus on the body of Luthen for 20 seconds. And in this moment, the tears are real from her. And you see that she does take him as a surrogate father. She does love him. And in many messed up ways, Luthen seemingly loves her. She is his redemption. It's a beautiful moment to end episode 10. I was just kind of floored by this moment, which brings us to episode 11, which is essentially Kleya now has to broadcast to Andor, help me. I need you guys to get here. I have a message that is of vital importance to the Rebel Alliance. Andor gets this message and is like, well, this is Luthen. He needs us. We need to do this for Luthen, because he wouldn't call this unless something needs to happen. And then on the other side, we have the character of Dedra, which is the next character that I really want to focus on. The arc of Dedra, how this arc ends. And it's such an unsatisfactory arc that is so purposefully unsatisfactory. Dedra pays for her utmost loyalty towards the Empire by becoming once again in prison. We learned that she was in prison in the last few episodes, that's her basically origin story. And that's where she ends up again. She ends up in jail for essentially what is understood to be kind of a clerical error. Like, that's at least how the Imperials frame it, as the speech between, and I'm blanking on his name, Director Krennic, that's his name. Like, she gets punished for basically being the most hungry, the most ambitious. And it's such a great symbolism of what ends up breaking these totalitarianism rules, these authoritarians, which is they have such huge egos, and they're infighting with one another, and they're stabbing each other in the back. And it's so stupid. Like, you look at the character of Krennic in this, and he's such an idiot because he does kind of appear so obsessed with his Death Star that he doesn't notice what's going around him. And I think that's just such a wonderful message in this, and how this captures this moment is Dedra doesn't get the glory. She doesn't get Luthen and Kleya. She doesn't get this big standoff. She doesn't get to die in battle in glory. She gets thrown in jail as a clerical error. Her ambition is too much for the Empire. And it's also the stupidity of the Empire. Imagine if they had more characters like Dedra working at the high ranks of the Galactic Empire. That's the flaw of it, is they don't reward this, and they don't seemingly notice the potential of her. It's such a sad moment when she's just in the cell alone, given her life up as a monster. Like, she has accepted her faith, as we saw in the last episode, as a monster, to then only be spit out by the Imperial machine. And there's just this incredible moment where I think she's starting to realize it. And it's Ben Mendelsohn as Director Krennic, who's incredible every scene he gets in this show. He has an interrogation of her. And in this, he's just laying it on. Like, and I think this ends up being what I think Luthen's plot is supposed to be, is he basically makes it look like she had to have been in on this, or if not, then she's just way too ambitious and way too stupid to be a part of this, and that she's spoiling everything. That's what I think Luthen's plot is, at least, or what he's trying to do in this final moment with Dedra. But essentially, like I said, Dedra's in there with Krennic, and Krennic's laying it out. Like, I think he says, you have all the makings of a rebel spy. And that's just with all of these characters, and none of them get a ceremonious ending. None of these characters die with any form of honor. Dedra ends up in prison for presumably the rest of her life, enslaved into this prison that threatens to kill her every time she steps on the ground. Then we have the character, the Major Leo Partagas, I think is his last name. he pays with his own life out of cowardice, knowing that he would rather kill himself by blaster rather than meeting the Emperor. It echoes so much of how Adolf Hitler dies, the fact of the walls closing in. And that's something that I thought about a lot with Dedra and a lot with Leo and essentially all of these characters in the Empire. The walls are slowly closing in. Obviously, we know what will end up happening to Krennic in Rogue One. The walls close in, and he realizes there's nothing else he can do. There's this wonderful moment again with Gilroy's writing where you see this understanding between Krennic and Leo. And it's such a small little moment, but it adds so much depth and realness to the world, where Krennic in one of his softer moments is just basically like, I can't protect you, Leo. Like, that's essentially just, it gives you this history. It gives you the idea that Leo and Krennic probably went through the Imperial, like, Naval Academy together, that they've gone up, that at one point Leo had more power, at one point Krennic had more power, but they've always kind of been in this story, in this mission, in the Empire together up until this point. And Krennic can no longer protect him. It's, again, just this unceremonious ending for this character of Leo. He is the most intimidating of these characters that we've seen in the Imperial Officer, an incredible actor in this moment. And then ultimately, when the time comes, he knows that the wrath is far scarier than him dying, and he dies the coward's way in this. He doesn't want to face the justice that he knows that's coming, because he's also listening to the galactic scans. Maybe he doesn't get killed by Vader, but he knows the Rebel Alliance is here and it's not going to stop, and they don't have an answer to it, and it's only growing. His idea of keeping the galaxy quote unquote secured is over, and it will eventually cost him his life one way or the other. Now we get to the main focus of this, which obviously episode 11, it follows this rescue escape of the character of Kleya. Andor gets there, basically discovers the plans for the Death Star, or at least discovers that there is a Death Star in existence, and they have to get back to Yavin 4 and basically convince the Rebel Alliance, go out, you guys gotta deal with this. Which brings us to maybe our toughest moments within the show, which is the bureaucracy, which is the fact of knowing something is evil and believing that something is probably evil, and then inaction. This finale is all about action versus inaction, as much as so that the character of Bail Organa, now played by Benjamin Bratt, says so as much. At the end, when he finally makes the decision to fight the Empire, he says essentially, I would rather go down swinging. I think that's a powerful idea, and also one that is extremely timely right now, which is, are we going to allow our freedoms to be stripped? Are we going to allow this to happen to us? Or are we going to protest? Are we going to fight? Are we going to make people's lives harder by being active, by not just standing idly by? I think that's the whole idea of the Rebel Alliance, is they have an opportunity to stand idly by. A lot of them are seemingly wanting to stand idly by and just take Luthen as a madman, or they have the option to fight and see what becomes of it. The Rebel Alliance must accept their revolutionary roots, and I think this is true for all coalitions, all these that grow. It is the acceptance of what comes before. It is the acceptance that to fight oppressive, usually it kind of starts in either it's guerrilla warfare, whether it's these revolutionary forces, these just scattered groups of revolutionaries who eventually kind of form this coalition and bring legitimacy to it. Mon Mothma, Bail Organa obviously legitimize the Rebel Alliance and allow it to be formed and become the force that ends up destroying the Galactic Empire. They don't do that without Luthen. They don't do that without Saw Gerrera. They don't do it without these revolutionaries. Some may even call terrorists on these lists, who are basically willing to take the actions to keep Mon Mothma and Bail Organa's hands clean. So in this moment, it has to become an acceptance. Are you going to do this? Are you going to remember what Luthen stood for? Or are you going to abandon him and forget what he did and everything that he made for the Rebel Alliance? And that's Andor's speech, essentially. Like, you have to acknowledge him. You have to believe him when he's giving you this information. He is so many things. He may even be a monster, but ultimately we stand here because of Luthen. And it's this question of action versus inaction, leaders willing to fight. And that ends up being what the Rebel Alliance is allowed to do. It is a leader willing to fight. I had mixed emotions at first of this series finale, just solely due to the fact that so much of it is this question of inaction versus inaction, and us knowing that eventually, obviously, the Rebel Alliance takes action. We know how this goes. So as I'm noticing, it's not that I dislike the story. I'm just thinking like, wow, I have 40 minutes left of my favorite Star Wars show, and it's ending with this question of action versus inaction. But again, that's such an important part of the show, is this doesn't work unless the people are brave enough to take the action. And in this moment, that's what Bail Organa, that's what Mon Mothma, that's what Cassian Andor, that's what the Rebel Alliance leadership does. They take action, and that's why they get to be heroes. Heroism is taking action. It's not just existing and quote unquote fighting and then really doing nothing. Hint, hint to maybe a certain political party right now, that it is timely now, then, and forever. And I think that's what this show does so well, which brings us to our final moments of this show. And I think what is the perfect just treat of a finale, and it's like the emotion, it's everything that you want this show to end on, which is essentially a montage of look at what we've built together and what Andor built. This is him as he's walking to his U-Wing, to the mission that we ultimately know will be the beginning of his suicide mission. We know where Andor's story ends. It's the beginning of the end right here for Andor. It literally walks us to the moments right before Rogue One begins. And we basically know what happens to everyone. We know what lies ahead for them. It's the final ascent, if you will. The Rebel Alliance has arrived to the fight, and they're here. That is what this montage represents. And there's this moment where he locks eyes with the Force healer, and it's not necessarily a question of, does he recognize what's happening? Does he recognize his place within the Rebel Alliance? All we know is Andor is confident in the fight, and he is going to be in the fight. Is it Force? Is it the Destiny? Is it just his own choosing? Is it stupid luck, as Andor describes it? It could be a faction of all of those things. All we know is that in this moment, Andor is going into the fight for a mission that he will not return for. That is sacrifice. They are fighting for something, and that's the difference between the Rebel Alliance and the Empire. We know what the sacrifice for the Rebel Alliance leads for. It leads to the freedom of the galaxy. And we know what the Empire fights for. They fight for nothing. They fight for their own downfall. They fight for Vader and Palpatine, puppets using them. That's also what then makes this ending beautiful. Rebellions are built on hope. They now have the hope to fight the Empire and win. They have the upper hand, and they now have the action to take it. And what lies ahead is painful. We know it's painful because we know what happens in Rogue One. We know what happens in A New Hope. And the final shot of this, which is maybe the key thing of this entire series, which is Bix on the wheat planet, and she's holding a baby that we're like, oh, that's Andor's son. When I watched this scene for the first time, I have to admit, I felt very sad. I'm just like, damn. Andor is never going to get to know his son. He doesn't even know this son exists. He never gets to go home to Bix and his son. And then I thought about that. I'm like, that's the beauty of Andor's sacrifice. He might not get to know them. He might not get to know his son, but he gets to know that he died for his son's freedom. He gets to know that his sacrifice doesn't die in vain because of his son getting to live a free life. That's the beauty of it. And so when I thought about it more, I'm like, isn't that what Star Wars is about? It's the son or the daughter redeeming the parent. That's what Grogu does to Mando. That's what Luke does to Vader. That's what Jyn Erso does to Galen Erso. And in this moment, it's also what Kleya does to Luthen. And it's also specifically what Andor's son does to Andor. Everything that he does, every risk he does, even if it's not something he's aware of, he does it for the people of the galaxy, which include his son, So does he die? Of course he does. We know what happens in Rogue One. This TV show makes me want to revisit Rogue One. You could literally watch Andor Season 1, Andor Season 2, Rogue One, and A New Hope, and you'd get one of the greatest just like Star Wars stories ever told, if not the greatest Star Wars story ever told. The beginning and the peak of a resistance. And it's beautiful. And in this moment, what we built, that's what this final walkthrough, this montage shows. Look at what we've built. Look at where we've come. Look at what we've lost in the case of Mon Mothma. Her daughter seemingly doesn't talk to Mon Mothma anymore. Like, that's her sacrifice. She sacrifices it, though, for her daughter. She sacrifices it for the idea that her daughter may be actually free. That's the beauty of this finale, and it's the beauty of this final walk. And it's why it's so important that the show ends on Andor's son. This is what we've built. Rebellions are built on hope. That is the redemption. That is the meaning. That is the importance of all of it. It's what Star Wars is about. It's the connection between all of us, whether it's the Force, whether it's destiny, whether it's just luck and stupidity. Whatever it is, we are all connected in this way. And Andor does what he does, and it's the most noble sacrifice that this character can do in service of the Rebel Alliance. I found it absolutely beautiful. I find it flooring. There's so much dimension and layers to it. And to end, it's just oddly one of the most optimistic moments within Andor, a show that doesn't have much optimism. It's just such a beautiful moment to end here and just say, this is what this is all for. Is it worth it? Of course it is. It never questions, is it worth it? I found that beautiful. I found it just completely captivating, and I love Andor. The series finale is Rogue One. You could even argue it's A New Hope, but like, the payoff for Andor happens in a movie that came out a decade ago. That's prequel storytelling, and that's going to bother some people, and I noticed myself feeling at the end of this episode. But ultimately, I'm just glad I went on this journey with these characters, with Tony Gilroy, with Diego Luna, with this entire cast, and to get to this moment that illustrates a show that I think speaks to the now. And I'm so like sad that we're losing Andor, but I'm also just so happy we got something this beautiful, this risky. Like, risk-taking is something huge with this show, and that we got it and it lands the plane. Andor, Season 1, Season 2, 5 out of 5. This is one of my favorite Star Wars things ever. With that said, thank you all so much for watching my review of Andor. I'm hoping you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you to everyone who supported me last week with my last episode on episodes 7, 8, 9. Just your guys' support always means the world to me. Make sure to subscribe to this channel for more.